Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Cornerstone conversation by the American Cornerstone Institute. We're so pleased to have Dr. Carson and Dr. Carol Swain with us today to discuss critical race theory, one of the issues that has dominated conversation in the media today. So before we start, I just wanted to mention that we are recording this, and a recording of this video will be shown on our website at americancornerstone.org, as well as on our Facebook and YouTube channels. The Cornerstone Conversations are made possible by our generous donors. If you'd like to sign up for advance notice of our programs, please visit us on our website and sign up for our newsletter. You may ask questions via our chat. We only have 30 minutes today, so hopefully we can get through a lot, but I appreciate everybody's questions, and hopefully we can get through a lot of them today. So our speakers today don't need an introduction. I wanted to turn it over to Dr. Carson, who is the founder and chairman of the American Cornerstone Institute.
Thank you, Evelyn. We're extremely delighted to be here today, particularly with one of the people I admire greatly, Dr. Carol Swain, a person of great intellect and great courage, because it does require a lot of courage these days. If you are African-American descent and you don't buy the general line that's put forth by the progressives, they try to demonize you. And the fact of the matter is, Black people, white people, brown people, yellow people, it doesn't matter, are individuals. And they have a brain that God gave them. And they have the right to use that brain and to think thoughts that don't necessarily correspond with the same thoughts as other people. And the thing that really determines who a person is, as Dr. Martin Luther King emphasized so strongly, I suspect he'd be quite disappointed with critical race theory, is that it's the character that makes the person, not the color of their skin. Critical race theory turns that completely upside down and says the color of the skin makes an enormous difference in terms of who you are and what you should think. And of course, the current president said something that I thought was beyond the pale. He said, if youth are having difficulty deciding between myself and his opponent, you ain't Black. So, I mean, he is the one who determines whether you're Black or not. Are you kidding me? I mean, this is so absurd. But I'm glad that we're having the discussion because one of the things I hope people don't forget is that when you create the right environment, such as happened a few years ago under the previous administration, removing tons of regulations, the appropriate kind of tax incentives, other things where you create an environment of growth, what happened? You had the lowest African-American unemployment rate, not since Kennedy, not since Johnson, not since Reagan, but ever. And it happened pretty quickly. And wages were going up. And the whole concept of a rising tide floats all boats is much more consistent with the American philosophy. That's what America represents. And with that, I would love to hear from Dr. Swain.
I am delighted to be a part of this. And Dr. Carson, I've always, I don't know how close we are in age, but I have followed you and your career and been so inspired by your life. And as you know, my life, was very difficult. I was one of 12 children, born and raised in rural poverty, dropped out of school after the 8th grade, married at 16, had my first child by 17. By the time I was 21, I had 3 small children. I got a high school equivalency, went to a community college and got the first of 5 college and university degrees, graduated with honors with a bachelor's degree, and was steered into academia, became a professor, was tenured at Princeton early, and then moved on to Vanderbilt, where I became a full professor. And I enjoyed winning national prizes and getting lots of accolades, signing bonuses, until I became a converted Christian, had a conversion experience, and increasingly became more conservative. But even when I was a Democrat, I had common sense and I didn't see the world the way other people around me saw the world. And so I was being called a conservative back then. And this critical race theory, when I was in school, you had professors, that were Marxists, and they were talking about some of these ideas. I wasn't interested in it. And it was only later, after President Obama was elected, that I became very curious, because I saw the impact it was having on the academy and on my life as a professor and the people around me. And so my last 4 years of teaching at Vanderbilt, I'm retired now, I focused on the impact of communism on American political life and culture. And it was a class that had a waiting list, and it was a class where I did not allow political correctness. It was a free speech zone. And what I see taking place today with critical race theory, I believe it is the civil rights challenge of our time.
I think that's an incredibly important statement. And interestingly enough, just, taking the 30,000-foot view here, if you're trying to fundamentally change a society, you have to create a lot of dissatisfaction with the society as it exists now. Now, what easier thing is there than to say that something you don't like is there because of racism, because of inherent racism, and that it's invaded our systems. It makes our laws unlawful. It just goes on and on. But here's the key. The saviors can come in and they can rectify all of this.
Yeah, but Dr. Carson, I believe that the reason we're having all of this stuff about systemic racism and critical race theory is because the political left, everything they have pushed has failed. And so it's really a distraction and a diversion. And when it comes to systemic racism, I was born in 1954. I was born into systemic racism. I watched it crumble. I watched the Civil Rights Act of 1964 being passed, the Voting Rights Act, 1965, open housing, 1968. And what I saw develop and evolve was a system that created opportunities for people like me. And I can tell you that many of my mentors, most were white. And there was a reason for that. I was so poor that none of the Black middle class people were interested in people like me, because they knew we were going to fail. And so my experience has been being encouraged by people that, some people would say were conservative, but racist. They offered a helping hand. I see America as a land of tremendous opportunities. And I love my country, and I hate what's happening to it.
Well, you and I were born very close at the same time. And so we've seen a lot of the same stuff. And, when I was a youngster growing up in Detroit and Boston, there was real racism at that time. It was everywhere you looked. And when I was in junior high school, for instance, I had gone from the bottom of the class in the 5th grade to the top of the class in the 7th grade.
You mean studying works?
It actually worked. Reading made a big difference. And, they gave out a special award in the 8th grade for the student with the top academic performance. And I was pretty sure that was going to be me. Take my report card to every class, and the teacher would put the mark on. They were all A's. I got to the last class. It was band. I was very good in band, by the way. And the turkey gave me a C because he wanted to ruin my report card. I wouldn't get the award. Well, to his chagrin, band didn't count, so I won anyway. And at the ceremony, with all the parents and teachers and everybody there, one of the teachers got up and chastised all the white kids, because I was the only Black kid, you obviously are not working hard enough. There is no way that this young man, with all the hardships, and she throws all that in, should be number one. But that was what people actually believed in those days.
Right.
I don't think people actually believe that anymore. There's been enough examples of Black people. And, that was one of the good things about affirmative action. In those days, you needed to give people a chance to demonstrate what they can do. That has been demonstrated now. And what do you have? You have Black admirals and generals and CEOs of major corporations, Fortune 500 companies, universities. We've had a Black president. We have a Black vice president. I mean, to sit there and say that things have not dramatically changed is a denial of reality.
It certainly is. And unfortunately, a lot of the children of these Black successes, Black leaders, have been steeped in the critical race theory that argues, that America is a terrible country, that that white people set it up to advantage themselves, that there's a property interest in whiteness, and they've redefined white supremacy to cover all white people. Now all white people are white supremacists. They need to divest themselves of their whiteness. They argue that racism is permanent, which means that if racism is permanent, and I believe it as a Black person, that means I'm permanently a victim. I don't believe there's an incentive structure that encourages young people to work the way we work, because we believed it would make a difference, that we could achieve the American dream. And no longer are they saying that we want to achieve a colorblind society or equal opportunity. They want to give undeserved advantages to people because of the color of their skin. And there's too much shaming, bullying, and accusations against white people, because there are plenty of poor whites in America, more poor whites than poor Blacks. And they would totally disregard these people and say that they don't matter. And that's not the America I know, the America I love.
And I think we have to fight strenuously against that. Again, your race is not something that you can control. Your character is something that you can control.
That's right.
So why would you judge someone based on something they can't control versus something that they can control? It makes absolutely no sense. It's totally illogical. And, as a brain surgeon, I can tell you, once I open that skull and I start operating that brain, there is no way that I can tell what race that brain belongs to. They're all the same. And that's the thing that truly makes you the person that you are. And, the critical race theory and injecting race into virtually everything, it actually makes us more like animals. And why do I say that? Because how do animals judge things? Based on what they can visualize, based on those external characteristics. They don't have the mental capacity to look beyond that and to look at the character and the depth and the individuality. It's a rabbit and I'm a wolf. I'm gonna chase it and I'm gonna eat it. I'm not gonna think about anything else. That's the way animals think. Why should people be that way?
Well, there's something else, that I don't believe we're saying strongly enough. What I see taking place runs counter to not just who we are as Americans, but our civil rights laws. The 1964 Civil Rights Act bans discrimination on the account of race, and race includes whites, and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment covers all persons. And so what I see taking place, the bullying, the shaming, the hostile workplaces, the hostile learning environments, all of those things, I believe, are things that there are legal remedies for, and that they should never be condoned by the US government or by our institutions.
Well, can you imagine what it would be like to be a child growing up in our society today? First of all, until very recently, and not in all places yet, you got to wear a mask. So you don't get to see people's facial expressions. That's a very important part of sociology and learning how to live in a society with people. And then you're told that you may be a highly contagious person, even though you're not having any symptoms, and you could infect your grandmother and she might die. So that when she does die, and you're a child, you're thinking maybe you're responsible for that. Not to mention the fact that you could die of some horrible thing, even though the chances of that are virtually zero, but that's not what a lot of people are putting out there. And then you're told if you're white, you and your family and your ancestors are the cause of all the problems that we have in our society. Now, how can you develop a good self-image with that coming at you? And if you're Black, you're a victim. You are permanently a victim, as you said, and there's not much you can do about it. And then to top all that off, after you're feeling like the total slime ball, now they're telling you, you may not be a girl or a boy.
That's what I was going to say, because we're talking about critical race theory, but there's critical gender theory and critical queer theory. And I can't imagine how difficult it must be for these young kids that are being told, even in kindergarten, to question whether they're a little boy or a little girl.
Yeah, it's almost child abuse.
It's
What we're
evil
doing to them.
and child abuse, especially all about these hormones that they're giving children that will permanently affect their bodies when it comes to their ability to have children and to have a normal life.
Well, to me, all of this stems from the fact that we've moved away from some of the fundamentals that help make this into a great nation. There was a study that was done by the Brookings Institute on poverty, and they concluded that there were a few things that you could do that would guarantee that you would, or that would assure that you would not live in poverty. You'd have a 2% or less chance of living in poverty. Number one, finish high school. Go ahead and get that basic education that allows you to function in society. Number two, get married. Number three, get a job. And number four, wait until you're married to have children. Now, these are things that we used to know. This is news now. In fact, you're not even supposed to say a lot of those things because somehow you are denigrating anybody who is in a situation other than that, which is not the case at all. You're just saying those are the things that tend to lead to stability and success in society. And we'd be willing to talk about that, particularly in the Black community, because when you look at what has happened over the last half century in terms of marriage, family, church attendance, faith in God, it's been devastating. And as those things have departed, those were the very things that allowed Black people to survive slavery and Jim Crow and segregation and all the unfairness that occurred. Now, when you remove those things and you still have to face adversity, it becomes very easy for you to adopt a victim mentality, a sense of entitlement, and all of these things. And this is not to say that bad things haven't happened. They have. I mean, yesterday was the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa riots
Right.
in Greenwood. I mean, that was despicable. It was horrible. No words to describe it. But it happened. Worse things than that happened. They're not all documented. But the fact of the matter is, we have moved on. We have to learn from those things. We can't bury those things.
Right.
We can't rewrite those things. We have to say, how did that happen? And let's make sure that it never happens again. You can't make sure it never happens again if you don't talk about it and if you don't deal with it. So we cannot abide this rewriting of history. this tearing down of everything, this renaming of everything. What we really need to do is say, who are these people? What did they represent? What was going on at the time? What can we learn from that? And how can we take that and move forward and make progress in our society?
Well, a couple of things I'd like to say is that even if you made a mistake, in my case, I was a high school dropout, so I needed a high school equivalency. I went to a community college. I got a second chance. That America is a land of tremendous opportunities. And so you can start anywhere changing your life. And there are people, in their 30s and 40s that decide to go back to school. This is the kind of nation where that's possible. And when you look at Tulsa and all the bad things that have happened, I really like Bob Woodson's approach. He looks at the resiliency of Black America and how did they build Black Wall Street? The government didn't finance the building of that city and all the success. There were no affirmative action programs or set aside programs. That should be the story that we focus on, the successes we have been able to achieve as Americans working together across color lines.
That is such an important piece of information. And in fact, Black Americans own more than $1 trillion of assets. There's less than 10 countries in the world that have $1 trillion GDP. So just to put that in perspective. Now, what if the Black community learned, like the Korean community, the Jewish community, to take money and turn it over a couple of times in their neighborhood before it goes out? Can you imagine the wealth that could be built? Instead of allowing people to convince you that you're a victim or allowing you to develop a crab mentality, where if one starts crawling out the barrel, you pull them back down. Those things have been going on for a long time. And if there is any systemic racism, it's on behalf of people who have very cleverly, ever since slavery, manipulated. They would tell the house slaves that you're better than the ones in the yard. They tell the yard ones that you're better than the ones in the field, and create that conflict. Because in many cases, in some of the states, Alabama, Mississippi, there were actually more slaves than there were whites. Right. And they were afraid that if there was an insurrection, they would not be able to deal with it. So they had to keep that going. And then after abolition of slavery, insinuate the idea that the ones with lighter skin better than this one, and the ones with the black skins are really the worst ones. And, there's always been this tension. And now in today's society, you cannot agree with this Black person if they have a different way of thinking. Let's keep the tension there. Let's keep the hatred there. And people keep falling for this stuff. We gotta get people to realize there's more than one way to skin a cat. And you have to be open-minded, you have to listen, you have to discuss, you have to look at the facts, like that Brookings study I talked about, and let that orient the way that you do things. At HUD, for instance, we really emphasized self-reliance and expanding the programs that would create self-reliance and creating things, like Envision Centers, where that young mother who has 2 or 3 kids, who hasn't finished high school, can come find out how to get childcare, how to get her GED, how to get advanced training, how to become self-sufficient, how to teach that to her kids. Sort of your story, which is an amazing story. Your story should be broadcast far and wide all over the place. You don't have to be a permanent victim. You can be a victor, and you can be somebody who inspires other people to do even better.
Well, Dr. Carson, I think we're going to have a sequel to this because we didn't get to answer the questions.
Evelyn, do you have any questions?
We do have some questions, and we're just at the end of our time almost. So, Dr. Swain, I think you're right. We're going to have to continue this conversation another time. But One of the things that, critical race theory has been discussed about a lot is in the elementary education system. And a couple of our questions are from teachers and school board members about what they can do to try to push back against implementing CRT in their classrooms. Any thoughts on that, Dr. Swain?
Yeah, one of the things that I mentioned is I'm working on a book, Critical Race Theory, a guide for the perplexed, that I hope to have available by July 1 that will offer some strategies. And I think that you're on safe ground when you point out the shaming and bullying of children. It's un-American, not consistent with who we are. It runs counter to our civil rights laws. You're not supposed to discriminate against any group because of their race, and that includes white people. And then the Equal Protection Clause. I don't believe that the school systems who are pushing a race agenda and political activism instead of education, they're not on solid ground. And so I think that if you stand on principle, just principles that we know, that you can have, you can get the upper hand.
And the key thing is courage. You can't be one of those people who sits in the corner and put your head down and hope that nobody calls you a racist or some other name. You cannot be the land of the free if you're not the home of the brave.
Amen. And you should organize with other parents. And there are teachers in those schools that support you. They may be afraid to speak. We have to organize. And then again, stand on principle, and the principles are on your side.
Absolutely, that's great. And I'm so sorry we're running out of time here, but I wanted just to turn it over to Dr. Carson for some closing remarks.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank Dr. Swain for just her eloquence and her compassion. And I just want everybody to know that this is not a problem for one group or another. This is a problem for all of us. And we need to recognize that the United States of America, United States of America, is a strong nation, too strong to be brought down by China or Russia or Iran or North Korea or anyone, but we can be brought down by ourselves. We, the American people, are not each other's enemies. We must stop allowing ourselves to be manipulated by things like critical race theory and other things that tear us apart, do not bring us together. We can do this. We've faced greater challenges than these, and we can go on to greater things than we've ever accomplished before. But each one of us has a part to play.
Hear, hear.
Great, thank you so much. And Dr. Swain, it was so great to have you on. We will definitely have you back, and we look forward to seeing your book. For those of you in the audience, I apologize for not getting to all your questions, but hopefully we can have another Cornerstone conversation on this in the near future. For a recording of this and our other Cornerstone conversations, please visit our website at americancornerstone.org. Thank you.